In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started needle felting on top of your weaving. So let's get started. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to simply weave a little sample piece. I highly recommend doing this because it basically allows you to play around with needle felting without it being on your actual piece, which means if you don't like it in the end, or if you just want to mess around, it's totally fine. It's kind of like a sketchbook. In terms of warp string, you can kind of use whatever you want. This is 412 linen, this is 48 cotton, and this is 88 cotton. All of them will work. Keep in mind that linen is a little bit more dense, so it has a higher chance of breaking your felting needles. So far, I haven't really had a lot of issues with that, which is why I'm continue to use it. For your weft, I find what works best is yarn. So we're talking, this is Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick, which is what I'm going to use for the example today. This is a great super bulky yarn. It's nice and squishy. It's an acrylic wool blend. It works great for this, but you could use anything. This is also a wool acrylic blend. This is a worsted weight 100% wool. And this is some of my hand spun. I have needle felted I think on all of these, and they will all work totally fine. You can even use 100% acrylic if that's what you have. Just a regular yarn will work really well for this. The only materials that I wouldn't suggest for your weft would be something like a macrame cord or a macrame string like this. This is very, very dense, and felting needles are made of hard and very thin steel, so they do snap easily if you're trying to needle felt into something that is too dense. So I wouldn't recommend these. Now that we've talked about the different weft materials that you can use, I'm gonna just quickly weave some plain weave with this so that we have a bit of a blank canvas to work with. Now that I have a little mini canvas to start needle felting on top of, let's talk about needle felting tools. All the felting tools that I will be showing in this video, you can find in my shop at spruceandlinen.com. Of course, you can get felting needle supplies from various places, but I'm gonna show these ones because these are the ones that I do actually use. So this is what a brand new felting pad looks like. This is a foam. Now, there are different types. Some people use styrofoam, which I wouldn't really recommend because it breaks down quickly and it might get little pieces of styrofoam into your piece. And then there are also ones that are made out of felt and stuffing. But I've really liked these ones, and here is what a more well-used one looks like. So you can see that it gets dented, it gets used, but I've been using this one for a couple of years, I think, and so it's gone through a lot of projects at this point. Now let's talk about the actual tools that will felt. So this is what a felting needle looks like. I'll lay it on this foam so hopefully you can see it really well. It's very small, it's very thin, and it's very sharp. So about from here to here, so the bottom inch of the felting needle is where there are little notches on the actual needle, and that is how felting happens. So I'm gonna try to show this close enough that hopefully you can see the little burrs. You can see those notches that are in the bottom inch of this felting needle, and that is what catches the fibers and helps them tangle up, which is what creates the felt. This particular one is a triangle shape, so this tip is a teeny tiny triangle shape, and that is what I use. I only use one size and one type of felting needle for my projects on my weavings. The reason for that is just that I want to keep things really, really simple because I use one type of wool, I use one type of felting needle, and that makes it easy for me. Now these become pretty cumbersome to hold like this, so I do have a couple of felting tools that I really like to use. One thing to keep in mind is to be so careful that you do not poke this into your finger because it hurts. I have done it many times, and you can get little finger covers made of leather or some other material like that so that you don't poke into your finger if you feel like you want that. But I try to just keep my other hand out of the way. So this is a single needle handle. So how it works is it's just a friction fit, and sometimes they get a little bit tight. So all that you do is this little piece comes out of the handle, you put the needle into this piece, and then you push it into the handle, and you don't have to push it very far. It's just a friction fit, so it's just in there to fit tight enough, and then you can needle felt like this. The other tool I really like is this one from Clover. It holds 3 felting needles, and this is great for when you're doing larger areas because it literally will help you to felt something about 3 times faster. What's nice about it is you can open it up, you can add new needles if you break one, and you can also take needles out if you want to use 1, 2, or 3. Now for me, I always keep 3 in this one, and then I just keep 1 in this one, and I just switch back and forth because I find that a lot more efficient. And there, I just lost one. And then another thing I would recommend doing when you're not using your felting needles, to either keep them in a plastic container where you won't accidentally grab them and poke yourself. So you can have like a little container like this, or what you can do with these ones, and what I typically do, is I just leave them inside my felting pad. So that way I don't randomly grab this and poke myself. So let's actually talk about the felting process now. So what I like to do, since my felting pad, I think this is about 1.5 inches thick, what I don't like doing with my weaving is like hanging it from here, putting pressure on the warp itself. So what I like to do is I'll grab a couple of books that are about the same thickness as my felting pad. It doesn't have to be exact. It's just kind of a approximate thickness. And you can see here, this one is actually a little bit on the tall side, so I could just use this additional felting pad for now because that's a better thickness. So I like to prop it up like this so that it's about the same height as my felting pad. And then I place my felting pad right underneath where I'm going to be working. We're gonna start with a dark color so that you can really see the underside, what it looks like. I know that this process seems like, how does this happen? How does this stay? It's kind of magic, but truly all that needle felting is essentially tangling up the fibers. And the more that you tangle them, so the more that you needle felt, the tighter and tighter those fibers will get. So when we're talking on weaving, we do have to be a little bit careful with how much we needle felt because it will start to pull your piece in. There are so many different types of wool that you can needle felt with, basically any type of wool, and it's going to provide different textures and that kind of thing. But again, I like to keep things really simple. I use one type of felting needle and I use one type of wool. This is extra fine merino wool combed top, and I really like it. I like working with it. I find that it works well. I have so many different colors of it, and so that's what I use. Now, previously, I thought that you had to use wool for needle felting, but I've recently learned that you can use other vegan fibers or plant-based fibers to needle felt. I haven't personally tried them, but if that's what you have, give this a try. So let's create just a little simple shape. Maybe we'll do a rectangle to start. So what I like to do, sometimes I'll split my wool. So I just have a little piece here, and using up your scraps with needle felting is a great option when you have these shorter pieces that may not be good for weaving. So I have it a little bit thinner now, and I'm gonna make it even thinner. Then from here, if I'm making something like a rectangle, I might fold in the ends a little bit, just so that it starts becoming the shape that I want it to become before I even needle felt. And this is probably a little bit more than I need. So I might pull a little bit more away, and then let's again fold those in, and let's call that good. So I'm just gonna go in the corner here. I'm gonna start with my 3 felting needle. So basically, the biggest thing to remember when needle felting is that the way you go into your piece is the same direction you have to come out. If you go into your piece, turn, and come back out, that's what's going to break the tips off of your felting needles, and we definitely don't want that. So another good tip here is to, especially when you're first starting out, to needle felt in a place where you can find that tip if it does break, because they are very sharp and you definitely don't want those to end up on your floor and find them later with your feet. Even if you want to felt at an angle, you can do that, but you just need to make sure that you're going in and back out at the same angle. So if you're going like this, that works. If you're going like this, that works. whatever that is, just go in the same direction, in and out. So I have my 3 felting needle tool. I'm starting mostly in the center, and I'm just going in and out. Now, every once in a while, and you'll see how small this is already getting, we can always add more. Every once in a while, if you're felting something really large, you're gonna wanna peel up your piece off of your felting pad. So I'm just gonna keep going in and out. And then now I might start going closer to the edges for this shape. So I might go at a little bit of an angle and decide where the borders of this shape are going to be. So now I'm working very, very slow so I can be a little bit more precise. And sometimes what I do, which isn't great for the felting needles, but I do it, is I'll kind of use the tip of my felting needles and I'll sort of pull the wool where I want it to go. You have to be very careful with that. Again, you don't want to pull hard, but I might kind of place it and then felt. So I'm just pushing, essentially pushing and knotting the wool into my weaving. So I'm gonna flip this over and you can kind of see the little fibers are coming through to the other side. Now this hasn't been felted very much, and just for the sake of this video, I'll show you that I could still pull this off. So it's not felted very much, and because I'm talking mainly about doing woven wall hangings, the felt doesn't have to be super intense. You don't have to felt it a ton. As long as it stays on there, it doesn't just fall off, that's enough. And you can kind of gauge and decide how much you want to felt. So I'm gonna push that back in, and now I'm gonna move a little bit quicker. Again, just going in and out. And you can see the shape isn't great yet, but that's okay. So I'm just, again, I'm not doing a ton on the edges yet, but you can see that the edges are getting a little bit crooked. So what I might do here, where there's a little jut in and I want to push the wool out this way, is I'll angle my needles so that they're pushing the wool out in that direction. And then over here, I might want to go that way. And up here, I can go straight. Then, once I have a bit of a base, I can also go in with my single felting needle and really just define edges. So this is gonna give you a little bit more precision with the single needle. And again, if I need to add more wool, I can do that. But what I'm doing here now is just trying to define those edges a little bit better. And I'm just going in and out. That's all it is. But because of those little notches on the tip of this needle, again, you can kind of see them there, it is tangling up the wool, kind of similar to back combing. So it's just creating this kind of matted texture, essentially. Now, what you can also do, if you're like, okay, I'm right-handed and I wanna go this way, just turn your whole loom around when you need to work at a different angle. And I find that's much easier than trying to, go like this. So we can just turn it and we can felt some more. And I can see here, this line isn't super straight. So I'm gonna go in and see how I'm just using this needle very slowly to push the fibers over just a little bit. Like you're not gonna move them a ton, but you can still move them a little bit so that you're getting that shape that you want. You're kind of manipulating the fibers to where you want them to go. And then I'm going back throughout the middle a little bit more. In terms of when is it felted enough, that's kind of comes with practice. And here, I'm just gonna show you, I'm peeling this up from my felting pad. And you can see it's coming through all the way to the back. And that'll just remain fuzzy on the back. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just kind of how needle felting works. So I'm gonna felt that a little bit more. Then I'm gonna turn my loom again, because now I'm noticing that the shape isn't quite where I want it to be. This needs to be pushed out just a hair. And of course, you can be as precise or as imprecise or like a little bit more organic with your shapes as you want to be, especially when you're weaving on, or when you're needle felting on such a chunky material like I am. Getting those super sharp lines is slightly trickier. So we're getting that rectangle shape pretty good. Now right in here, I can tell that I have something, see how the fibers are coming a little bit over? So I might just try to clean up this line. Now I can see that, for instance, and we'll just do this for the sake of this example, there's a little bit missing right here. So you can probably see that. So what I can do with that is I can just add a little bit more. So I might just take a teeny tiny bit, you can barely see it, and I'm gonna sort of ball it up in my fingers, and I'm just gonna start adding it into this corner where I feel like I kind of didn't have quite enough. You can see that's helping to fill out that area. So now I'm going back in with my 3 needle tool just to felt it a little bit more. And there we have a little rectangle. It's not perfect, but again, you can spend as much time as you want or don't want to creating a perfect shape. And again, this is what it looks like on the back. So basically we've pushed the wool through the weaving and tangled it up into the weft of the weaving. So you can also needle felt onto other fabrics that you didn't weave. So things like linen or cotton or even a piece of felt. So for this next little example, I've grabbed a few different colors of blue. So if you're wanting to create some sort of sky, this is how you can do it. So in this one, we're gonna cover more of the actual weaving itself, and we're going to be using just very thin pieces at a time. So I have this little piece of wool, and I'm just gonna grab the very end, hold your hands a little bit further apart, and now we have this longer piece. So we'll do this example a little further up. So we have a thin piece, we can even do a couple of those thin pieces. And then we can grab a different color. And again, just grabbing a very thin piece. We can lay it over top so that those colors are gonna start to mix. And we have another color here. Now, to make it a little bit thicker, I can just kind of keep adding on to that. So let's start with that. And I'm gonna use my multi-felting tool for this again. And I'm just gonna start felting it in. So I'll do a little bit in the middle, and then I'll go to the edges. Now, if this wasn't a woven wall hanging and I was creating a whole sky, I would take it all the way to the edges, and you can even sort of, with these little fluffy ends, you can kind of wrap them around the edge of your weaving so that they go completely around, and then those edges, as you felt over here, will just get felted into the back. Now, the nice thing about this type of felting, especially with doing a sky, again, is that you can always add more. So it's good to start with just a little bit, felt it in. So I'm going all over the place with my felting. I'm gonna remember to lift it off my felting pad every once in a while. And I might decide, okay, that's a little bit too much dark blue. So then I might add a little bit more light blue right on top of it and just start blending that in. And this is where you can get some really unique and painterly looking felt, is just by mixing multiple colors right onto your piece. So then I could decide I want to add a little bit of white. So I have some white here. Grab a thin piece of that, and maybe add it like this, and you can kind of spread it out. Lifting it up off of the felting pad. And again, I'll show you the back. You can see all those little fuzzies that I'm pushing through. This isn't felted very much yet, so I definitely want it to be what's called a hard felt. So there's sort of different stages of felt. There's soft felt, and then somewhere in the middle, medium felt, and then hard felt. So that's gonna be when you felt it a ton. Now, we don't want to go too far again on our weavings, because especially if you're only felting part of your piece, you wouldn't want to felt too much in one section, because as you can already see, it wants to kind of pull in the sides a little bit because everything's getting tighter and tighter as you felt it more. So now I might think, okay, that dark blue going into the white is a little bit too much. So I can again add in some lighter blue between to try to just sort of blend those colors out a little bit more. Add in some of this lighter blue and maybe take it to the other edge. And you'll kind of get to a point where you've added enough fiber that you're not seeing the texture of your weft beneath. See how over here you can still see those weft yarns? I don't mind seeing sort of the bumps of the weft, but I don't want to see the weft itself usually. So again, we can place some more over top of that, spread it out. And again, with this end, I will just tuck it around the back. And then when I felt over here, that wool in the back is also going to get felted. And here I'm still at the stage again, where I could be like, ah, I don't like that. And I'm just literally able to peel it off. And I'm like, maybe I wanted that a little bit wispier. So I might pull it off a little bit and then just felt it back down, add some more. So there's a little bit of play that you have with this in terms of being able to remove it, but if I tried to remove all of this, my yarn underneath at this point would be a little bit more haggard looking now and wouldn't be as smooth. So that's where I say it's a great idea to just sort of play around on a sample piece like this to get the hang of it before you go into your actual woven wall hanging. For felting in a more painterly way, we kind of have to think a little bit like painting. Now, I'm not personally a landscape painter or anything, but if you start looking at a lot of paintings and observing how the colors are added and layered and even the shapes on those paintings, that's a really great way to start needle felting in a more painterly way, is to just sort of look at a painting and try to make some similar shapes and shading with your wool. Now, I didn't have a clear inspiration for this little sky that I'm creating now, so it's actually more difficult for me because I'm not really sure where I'm going with it, but I'm just trying to create a variegated, somewhat painterly looking area here just to show you how to blend those colors. Now, something you can do on the edges as well is you can kind of angle those needles again, making sure that you go in and out at the same angle, but that'll help you clean up those edges. And this does take time. Needle felting is not a quick process unless, again, you're just doing one little shape. It definitely takes time and patience. And one thing I would recommend when working on a piece that does take a lot longer, like a needle felted piece, is to just every once in a while walk away from it and then come back with fresh eyes, because sometimes you stare at something for way too long and then it's really difficult to see like what you should do next. Now, another thing you can do if you do find that your piece is sort of pulling in is to just sort of tug it a little bit back out. Of course, it will want to tighten up again once you're needle felting, but that's one way you can try to keep those edges from going in too much. So let's take a look at the back again. And you can see there's tons of fuzz back here now. And there's those edges that I wrapped around. Now, I don't typically needle felt from the back at all because it's gonna push those fluffy fibers up to the front, and I want the front of this piece to be a little bit more smooth. So I would just keep needle felting this until I felt like it looked the texture that I want it. And I know that's a very vague way of saying that, but that's kind of all that it is you just have to needle felt until you feel like it's good. Another thing that you'll notice here is that what's happening now is there's some little holes. what I like to do when I feel like this has been needle felted enough, with this multi-tool, I just kind of comb out the surface a little bit, and it helps hide some of those holes. Again, when you're talking a woven wall hanging, you don't have to be super intense with how much you felt this. We're just trying to make sure that it won't fall off. That's kind of my gauge in terms of how much I might felt something. I don't want it super fluffy on the surface, and I don't want it to fall off, but I also don't want to felt it so much that, again, we're creating huge divots in the piece, in the sections that we're needle felting. That's literally all there is to that. I would keep adding, I might add clouds, whatever I'm going for in that area. And then again, you can look at paintings, add more colors, and really take your time with creating a painterly look. So that's how you can kind of create a more variegated surface and a more painterly one. And then on top of this, you could add cloud-like shapes or whatever kind of shapes would go with what you're creating. So I'm gonna show you the back of this once more, and now you can see it's very, very fuzzy. So that would just be how the back would end up, and this is the front. So it's just adding more colors, pretending that your wool is paint, and just playing around with it. So one more thing that's really cool that you can do with needle felting is you can actually needle felt yarn directly onto your piece. Again, you can play around with the different types of yarn to do this with, but I'm gonna use some 100% wool here. This is a little bit bulkier than a worsted weight. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but what's really neat is you can actually use yarn to just felt onto your piece. So I can lay this out and I can just start felting that in. What's cool about this is you could use this technique to create lettering. You could use it to create really complex shapes, or you could even use it to outline different shapes. I have not tried this with something that isn't wool, so just keep that in mind. So now we're just kind of creating these lines, and this, once you've felted this in a bit, would not be able to fall off. So you could create all different kinds of shapes using this technique, and I'll show you the back again. And you can see just those hints of the yellow poking through into the back of this piece. So there are a few basic ways that you can needle felt on top of your weaving. And if you want to see more of this, check out this playlist where I have every single project that I have needle felted on top of my weaving. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and don't forget to subscribe.